So turn back now if you don't enjoy video game speculation and prediction of things to come. This is rampant speculation based off of a series of events that have unfolded and actions taken by Square Enix. Hello everyone and welcome to Ginger Prime. My name is Brian, and if you're a returning subscriber, what's up Soul Nation? You know you got a big brain. Thanks for coming back for another video. We've got a lot to talk about, but before we dive in, the top link in the description of this video is for the podcast channel Ginger Gaming Radio. Thanks obviously to everyone who's already gone over there and subscribed, and hopefully we'll hit our goal soon of 1,000 subs so I can stop plugging it at the top of these videos. So I leave the choice up to you. Now let's go ahead and dive in. Hopefully you're going to enjoy this video because I'm really excited to talk about it. I was talking about it today on live stream, and so let's talk about big changes that are coming. Okay. So first things first, just like the title of the thumbnail says, I cannot shake this feeling. Over the years, they've only grown stronger and stronger and stronger of big things that are going to be coming to the world of Final Fantasy XIV. Now, what are these things you suggest or ask? Well, if I talk about a rejoining or another calamity, usually people start to ramp that up and thinking that I'm critiquing or criticizing the game in some way. We've already done that. That's been played out. Bahamut came. He wrecked the world. We got 2.0. 2.0 is great. Okay, like I totally understand and completely can agree with some of that statement. However, from the narrative perspective of the game, we've been building to this potential rejoining, or maybe we haven't. I don't know. Shadowbringers has really changed a lot of it, but it still feels like with Norvant and with the first, there's definitely some things that are missing out of the world of Eorzea, and I can't wait to see what happens with the story going forward. Obviously, the next week is going to detail that with patch 5.3, so we'll see if we get any more insight, and maybe we'll follow up with this video. But narrative aside from 14, this also has to do with Final Fantasy XI. Just this week, they announced that Final Fantasy XI is actually getting more story that goes beyond the story of its final chapter with Rhapsodies. And however, you do need to finish Rhapsodies to be able to take part in that. That drops in August, and I can't wait to make some sense of that. Why is this important, and why does this relate to Final Fantasy XIV? Well, there's a lot we have to cover here. There's a lot that you might not even be aware of. But years ago, they started working on Final Fantasy XI Mobile. That has yet to come to fruition, and Square Enix has actually changed the way that they kind of describe that project. As opposed to Nexion being developed and it's kind of over there, they're working on it with them in collaboration. Now, they also announced last year that they're going to be working on something big for Final Fantasy XI for its 20th year anniversary, which should be sometime in the next 2 years. They at least here it's 18 years, it might be 2021, but in my mind I'm just thinking 2021, 2022, especially with COVID, anything can change and be delayed. So you have that aspect. Then you have the aspect of more story coming to Final Fantasy. I think hands down when we look at it with Final Fantasy XIV, Final Fantasy XI, there's no change that happens in a game without a story that's attached to it. And we saw that happen with 1.0 to 2.0 for 14. Now with 11, now with something big coming, we don't know what that big thing is, for its 20th anniversary, what could this be? What does it mean? And why put a story in, especially when they said they're done? I think big things are about to change. We'll get into that here in a second. In the 14 sphere, we also have seen them move the MOG station into the Square Enix account system. I think the first big thing that we're going to see happen, and again, when I talk about this, note that I'm not talking about it in the immediate, I'm thinking 2 to 4 years time span for these changes to kind of come all in place. They could happen sooner if they've already been working on it, but in the 14 space, we know that Yoshi P has been working on a 2016 project. What could that be? They've shown off some artwork. We'll have to come and revisit that. Okay. They've also, like I said, moved the MOG station stuff. I think the first big thing is we're talking about a unified account system for these games. And we kind of have that. You can go and join your Square Enix account to your Play Online account and more. But why move into the Square Enix accounting system? And I think that's going to relate to everything we're also seeing with Adventures and with Outriders and more. There's a lot of games and they want to be able to connect your account together so that as you're purchasing games, they have just a better understanding of it. We've also talked about in heavy detail Final Fantasy XIV, and Yoshi P's gone into extreme detail the difficulty it would be to kind of remove the PS3 assets. Chris and I sat down for a video just over at Work to Game detailing kind of the concept of does Final Fantasy XIV need a new Genesis, in which that you remain, I don't know why I stuttered on that one, the existing game, like with Phantasy Star Online 2, but then your character and everything is also carrying forward. They somewhat did that with ARR, except for you can't go and experience 1.0. It's literally, here's the new starting point and go from there. Time and time again, over these games, especially these games that persist for a long time, Final Fantasy XI being the real example here, coming up on its 20th year anniversary, PSO celebrating its 20th year anniversary next year, that with these long time games, I think that essentially we've seen a difficulty of moving a community from one game to the next. For the longest time, number one thing that I see talked about with Final Fantasy XI is that they want the game to come back to consoles. I think to do that, you're going to be looking at, an Unreal Engine, which is what the mobile edition is baked into. So bringing this all together, what am I really saying? What is this real big change? I think all of these stories are somewhat bringing themselves together to bring in a cohesive Square Enix account, a cohesive login, even if they do a Final Fantasy XIV 2, kind of like New Genesis, in which that like 1,000 years or 10,000 years have passed. Here's this new game on a new engine for a new generation, but it still perceives and preserves your account carrying back and forth with your glamour, with all your unlocks, things like that. I think that would ultimately be a very big thing. They can also help tell the story of like, hey, this thing happened. And how do we tell that story in which that things got destroyed or the world got rejoined and things aren't the same anymore? And then you have new players coming in wondering what the hell's going on. We're going to see that with Destiny 2, with Beyond Light this November. So all that being said, I think big changes are coming to 14 in terms of its narrative. Now, whether they do a 14.2, I mean, I would say they would. I would say that this is probably where they're going to go with it. And I could easily be wrong, and that's why I wanted to put it out in a video, especially a speculation video, because like I have no more insight than any of you. But just looking at the kind of the tea leaves here when they're building to that. Now, I think that if they can connect that also in with Final Fantasy XI, one of the things that is not very well known is that in its original concepting, they were talking about you could go into your Mog house in 11 and step into Eorzea. You could step into 14. So they were already kind of thinking of how do you bridge the gap? How do you connect these games? How do you do that? And they decided from a narrative perspective, probably even from a technological perspective, that just wasn't going to work. But here we are, 2020, things are changing, and we're seeing other companies do the same thing. How do we take this big thing? How do we take this massive community and upgrade them to the latest technology? How do we do this and bring them forward? So I think one of the things that I want to definitely kind of talk about, especially as it relates to Final Fantasy XIV and let's say a 14.2, there's plenty of people who are now jumping into the game and having an incredible time. And they're like, why would we need this? Why do we need this? And for me, I look at it from a massive narrative beat, like closing out a chapter in terms of the Zodiac and Hydaelyn storyline. Being that that's so big, that's been the big motivating factor. Yoshi P says there's going to be lots of other stories, but then he's also talked about, again, the PS3 assets. He's talked about the challenges within the existing system and how much work it takes to go and do these simple little things. And then we've also, within the world of 14, seen more solo play content become kind of the main draw. The story and the narrative has been such a strong piece of the game overall, it makes sense that that's going to be the main narrative and driving factor. So that all being said, at some point, like instead of just closing down the game, instead of saying, okay, we're done, like do you go and connect it and preserve and create this ecosystem? I've kind of called it as the one sub to rule them all kind of approach when we've seen with other game publishers, Ubisoft, Microsoft, even PlayStation now, like having these unified subscriptions with a wide variety of games. All in all, I'm really beyond thrilled with the story coming to 11. I think that leads them to a narrative way in which that we could see something really big happen for 11, which they said big is happening for 11. And the gut reaction is like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that big thing? Because in my mind, I'm like, are you dropping it in Unreal? Are you bringing it back to consoles? And now I've set the expectation in my mind. And thus, if it doesn't happen, I'm ultimately going to be frustrated. 14 wise, it's probably the top of its game. Shadowbringer's the most beloved and praised that it's ever been. However, it's coming up on its 10-year anniversary here in a couple of weeks. 14 was released 10 years ago. Well, I mean, we don't need to go rush and bury it and call it done, bring me the next thing, oh Square Enix. However, when we start to look at the next generation of consoles, the next generation of hardware specs, the things that have changed in the last decade when it comes to game design and MMOs alone. I can't talk to you guys today about New World, but geez Louise, don't knock that one off yet. You know, keep that on your radar. We'll be talking about more here in a little bit, not in this video, but another video later. I think that you're going to see the ability for them not to sit here and be held back by decisions that they had to make from cutting over from 1.0 to 2.0, but they should also preserve what's come before. They should. I would hate for somebody to lose the ability to play through Heavensward. I would hate for somebody to lose the ability to play through Shadowbringers. I'm personally not the biggest fan of Stormblood, but that's okay. Like, I love the fact that there are people out there who love the game. That's great. Keep it up. Like, love that game. Like, love each expansion. I love how each expansion can also appeal to different people here and there. So it is this world. It is this thing to be discussed and be considered. And that's where I think we're building to. I think we're building to something big, some moment, some chapter closing moment, some engine closing moment where we dive into whatever this 2016 project is. Something that Yoshi P has been able to take the time and the resources and build it on new technology with all the lessons that has been learned from 14, with all the technology that's coming, that's here, that new games get to take advantage of, and really try to wow us, really try to blow our minds and get us really excited about it. I think 14 in and of itself is going to be a game that can really shake up the ground. And if you're for some reason still listening to this and you're not enjoying 14 now, like, note that there is reasons why you love it, and there's reasons why a lot of people have struggled with it. And there's things that when you look at both the 11 and the 14, that they do real well in themselves, but then the other one struggles with it. And one of the things I'm really excited to see is the narrative expand with Final Fantasy 11. I'm going to leave it at that, guys, because obviously the question would be to you, what would you want to see? What do you want to see big for 11? What do you want to see change within the world of 14? Again, I can't shake this feeling. I can't shake it. I keep trying to say, like, nah, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They're not going to, make 14 too. And the rumor has been 17. And we've, in the past, when talking about it, have even used 16 because we know it's confirmed Yoshi P is working on a new game, and he has for 4 years. And if it's an MMO, I would expect that to be another, maybe 2 years at a minimum before they're ready to show that off. And again, I don't want them to show it off until they're ready. But the theory is, at some point, like, maybe that's a big expansion. Maybe that's a big overhaul to 14. And how do you go about doing that? And I think that if, when you look at the market, when you look at gaming economies, you sit here and say, you got 11, you got 14. What if there's some way that, even if there's still two separate games, that you could log in to your client and you're like, hey, I want to go to Vandadeel today. Or, hey, I want to go to Eorzea today. And the only way you could really do something like that is by redoing 11, is by redoing 14, and to start taking that stuff into account. And I bet that's a hell of a lot of work. So, again, I think something big, whether it's on this level or something to the left or the right of it, it'll be interesting to revisit this video in a couple years to see how far I was feeling towards the correctness, or if I'm just out completely in left field and they just announced Final Fantasy 17 and now you've got 11, 14, 17, or whatever they end up doing. All in all, I'm really excited. I do appreciate everybody here for hanging out watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, love it if you hit that like button, if you feel like we've earned it. If you're new here and you haven't hit that subscribe button and you feel like this video earns it, let me know. Hit the subscribe button and let me know in the comments that this is the video that you sub to. I really would like to make sure I welcome you officially over here to the Soul Nation. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. For Ginger Prime, my name's Brian. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.